Hey y'all. If you're out there, say hello. Leave a comment so I know that you hear me. Please. I will say hello when I see your comment. I'm just going to test to see where I'm live. If you can hear me loud and clear, please say loud and clear. Give me a sign. I'm not seeing anything yet. Y'all must be tired of me by now. Hey, Miss Mary. Hey, Chandra. Hey, Susan, Carol, Florida, Bruce Leroy. All right. Y'all here. Great. Okay, awesome. All right, y'all. Hey, Ted. Hey, Daniel. Hey, Robin. Luthaza. Doug. Jason. Hey, all y'all. All right, so today you might see the title of today is Voter Suppression and How Do We Combat It? Let me just start off by stipulating a couple things. This is not a venting session. We know that voter suppression is rampant. We know that the GOP is going to pull out every trick under the sun. Hey Kim, hey Chrissy, J Spot, to suppress our votes. So what I want to move past is the venting, which is warranted, but at a certain point we gotta move past just talking about what's wrong and talking about what we can do. Now I would stipulate I'm not a voting expert. Okay, I'm not trying to present myself as a voting expert. I'm just a person that wants to figure out what's the plan, because November is 5 months away. We saw today, or we're seeing today, how big of a shit show it is in Georgia. And we have no reason to believe that if we don't do something, it will be any different. And so that's what I want to present today. I want you guys to leave your comments with your suggestions. I want to know, what are your tactics to ensure that your vote isn't suppressed? I understand the system. I understand the Kemps. I understand the Republican parties. But what are your personal things that you do? Because that's what we have to start sharing. We have the policy leaders, we have the elected officials, we have to push on them, we have the activists, we have the organizations, but what can we empower ourselves to do? What individual steps can we take to do? First, I want to give you guys some really interesting information, because I don't think that people really understand the level of decentralization that we have in our voting system. All right. And let me see. Okay, I had it. I tried to have some notes here, so y'all bear with me. There are more than 10,000 election administration jurisdictions in the United States. 10,000. So oftentimes we hear about the governor, oftentimes we hear about the Secretary of State, but understand that our actual elections are administered by 10,000 different jurisdictions. So that is something that we have to keep in mind, which means that where we can be most impactful outside of who we vote for governor, outside of who we vote for Secretary of State, is paying attention at the local level. We're seeing what's happening today in Georgia. Fulton County, Georgia is one of the places that is having a lot of problems. They're having a hearing today, actually. And you can watch it on their YouTube channel, the Fulton County Government YouTube channel, and they're going to have a hearing on that. You can call in. So these are the kinds of things that I want to talk about in terms of how we can be engaged beyond what the headlines are. So I'm going to go through some of you guys' comments before I get too far behind, and I'm just going to rattle off what you guys are saying. I asked, what are your strategies? What are you doing personally for your vote? And I'm just going to start here. Says vote early, abolish the electoral college. Well, that is something that we need to do, but that's not a personal thing. Absentee ballots, live in a low population state with easy vote by mail, and I am white. That helps. Sign up to be a monitor when you register. Vote early. Now moving to absentee ballot. Retweeting what I see, trying to make hashtags trend, hoping to do more. That's what we're going to talk about. In Atlanta, you have to go outside the city if possible. I don't know what that means, J-Spot. Vote often, one time per election. Don't do the voter fraud. Don't do the voter fraud. Counties run elections. That's what we're going to talk about. Early voting, mail-in ballot. I'm lucky I live in Manhattan. No lines by me. Okay. Write your congressman often, especially if they're Republican. Yes. Not only vote at a local office, run for local office. Voting by mail, the whole family. Colorado mails every voter a ballot. You just vote. It's easy, no brainer. My son recently moved to Atlanta. I thought the voter suppression tactics were bad in Florida, but Georgia's worse. In order to register, you must have social security number, card, birth certificate, ID. Yes, there are a lot of hindrances in particularly Republican states and increasing the requirements to actually register to vote. Communicating about changes. For example, New York just started early voting. Yes, vote early if there are early voting days. State is mail-in only. Bring proof of address. I've gotten challenged 2 election cycles in a row. That's a good one. Georgia is the canary in the coal mine. I'm voting early for show. Yes. Do my best to find out who the officials are and where complaints need to be filed. We need people that are responsible for oversight to be clearly visible. Yes. Vote every election. Vote. Get in mail-in ballot. Bring it in person the day of. Check to ensure you're registered often. Really great strategy. Right. Yes, I know that's sarcastic, Carol. She says, write my radical Republican reps often. That helps. Yeah. Because if you don't hold your representatives accountable, then they're going to keep doing what they're going to do. They're going to keep going based off the status quo and what they believe that their voters are voting for them from. All right. I'm going to do a couple of these. They will swoop you and deregister. Yes, absolutely. Wear comfortable shoes. Bring a lot of water, umbrella if needed. Okay, you think vote by mail will ever take hold in the United States? Well, we don't have a culture of voting by mail, and I think that's part of the problem. I should say Democrats in particular don't. It seems like Republicans kind of have a culture of voting by mail versus Democrats. So let's talk about some things, right? You guys have laid out so many great strategies. I mentioned, like I said, that elections are administered locally. Even if you're voting for president, even if you voted for Senate, the elections are administered locally. Okay. Now, there are different kinds of local administrators. You have township election administrators. You have county election administrators. You have some that have even different, So my first suggestion, find out who is administering your local election. Find out if it's one elected official. In states, it's different. So I'm not going to be able to give you the answer for your particular state. You got to look it up. But I'm giving you the questions to ask. Find out who your particular local elections administration official is. Find out if it's a commission. Find out if it's an elected position. If it's an elected position, then make sure that when the ballot is coming up, you're voting for the person who's actually competent. If it's a commission, well, that probably means that they have meetings. So make sure that you're attending those meetings if there are issues. Now, if you live in a place where you ain't got no problems, then hey, you ain't got no problems. But when you live in a place, and let me just also stipulate, this is not a personal responsibility wagging my finger. I know the second that I say, well, what are you going to do? People get all pissy. When I say vote, people get pissy. When I say vote by mail, people get pissy. And they want to give me every horror story about how this didn't happen and that didn't happen. This is why and this, that, and the other. That's fine. That's fine. These are all known things that are going to happen. It's not a knock on you. Okay, so you requested an absentee ballot. You didn't get it. Now you got to wait in line for 5 years. I applaud you for that. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with you. But what this conversation is about, it's about what can we do. That's all it's about. If you want to vent, you can go ahead and exit. I ain't got nothing for you. It's an venting session. All right. So, again, who's administering your elections? That's very important to find out. A lot of these people, because people don't know, they don't hold them accountable. Like, for instance, like I said, I mentioned it earlier, the Fulton County Election Commission is actually holding a meeting today. So those are the kinds of things, if you're in Fulton County, you might want to call into that and let them know you guys got to do something. So that's number one. Number two, all right, registering, right? We know that it's that people purge the voter rolls, right? So let's talk about getting registered to vote. Now, getting registered to vote, not everybody has online registration, all right? But one strategy, and this conversation is about strategies, and I've read off many of your strategies. I'm going to give you some of mine. All registering to vote is not created equal. Meaning, if you go and you fill out an application and you hand it in, then that registration has to be put in by somebody, a local official most likely. There's room for error when they put that in. I know this for a fact because I could tell you when I lived in Chicago, my registration was all messed up. Part of it was my fault because she handed it back to me and she was like, oh, is that right? And I was like, oh, yeah, it was right. It was totally wrong. Totally wrong. But I had a card so I could go there with all my wrong information and still vote. But if I had to go with my right information and I had to have voter ID and other kind of stuff, then it would have been an issue. So a strategy, a tactic, register online where possible. It's not going to be possible everywhere. You guys are going to be very happy to admit that. That's fine. But where it is possible to register online directly with your Secretary of State or whatever, however your government administration, your registration is administered, do that. Then that way you don't have to worry about somebody somewhere keying in your registration wrong or, having to physically take it somewhere. Some people prefer to do that. That's fine. I'm not telling you don't do something, if that's not your steez, but I'm just explaining to you where some of these issues come into place. All right. So now you're registered. Check your registration often. And don't just wait and check it the day before or the day of. Check it at least 3 months ahead of the next election. And somebody said, I assume registering online was available everywhere. Unfortunately, it's not. It's unfortunately. But a lot of places, here's another thing though, maybe you can't directly register on an online database, but a lot of times you can actually fill it out electronically, type it in, and then print it out. That's better than your penmanship. So that's another thing to consider. But you might not have a printer. So I'm not saying, I know people are going to always come up with, well, what about this, and what about that, and what about this, and what about that. I understand all the what abouts. If that what about means that you can't apply that, then let it fly. But most of us are on our phones. Most of us are on the computer, and we can do a lot of these things that I'm saying you can do. So that's all I'm saying is try to pick one. Pick one that works for you. But understand where the mistakes happen. Hey, Mom. I see my mom is on the chat. I always appreciate her tuning in. So somebody said, can you confirm online registration updates? In most cases, it's not a one size fits all, but yes, you can verify that you are registered online. The good thing is, doing it online, you probably can check it quicker versus if you fill out a form, you go take it here, you go take it there. Once you fill it out online, somebody's got it. A lot of people are saying hi, Mom, to my mom. So that's something you got to do. Register. Try to register online where possible. Make sure that you're checking your registration online. Vote.org is in here. Thank you. Please, you guys, go to vote.org. It is an amazing resource. I retweeted it earlier, but go to vote.org because they have every state. They have latest news. They have so many things, so many resources that make this so much easier for you. Okay, and I believe in vote.org, you can correct me, it's a Black woman-led organization. Hillary Clinton retweets about it. It's legit, y'all. Okay, so go on ahead, donate to vote.org, go visit vote.org. It does not cost for you to go to vote.org. That's free. Information is free on vote.org, and they put a lot of work and resources into that. So that's how you can, if you don't know where to start, then yes, they're confirming, and we are Black women led. Yes. That's what we're about. Solutions. We're about how do we empower ourselves? How do we take the information? Because one vote requires one registration, sometimes 5 or 6, though, to be honest with you, if they're suppressing our vote. But we have to make sure that we are using our resources. So vote.org. Now, register, check your registration. Now, we are trying to push to absentee mail-in ballots, right? Everybody cannot vote by mail. We understand that. Particularly the Native community, and Kamala Harris is somebody who's talked about this. Sometimes they have, issues with voting by mail, or, whatever the issues may be. Some people need to vote in person. This is not to deride anybody who wants to vote in person. Vote in person if that's what you want to do. But let's talk about voting by mail, absentee ballot. There are nuances there, but just for the sake of this conversation, we're just going to say mail-in ballots. In most cases, you can request a mail-in ballot online, and you don't need an excuse. So that is something. Now, when you go to the website, if you use vote.org, you will see that they usually have pretty generous deadlines, meaning you don't have to request it months and months in advance. However, it's probably a good idea to do that, mainly because we have COVID-19. There are still issues with that. A lot of people are actually now requesting mail-in ballots, and so don't you want your requests to be one of the first that are adhered to or fulfilled? I think you might want to. So I was reading about what's going on in Georgia, and one of the things, now let me stipulate, do I trust anything that the Republicans say? No. Do I trust anything that Brian Kemp says? No. Do I trust anything that his Secretary of State says? No. However, it is feasible, it is plausible that one of the reasons why there was a backlog in processing the absentee ballots was because of what is happening with the local elected officials and the order and how they chose to process the absentee ballot applications. And so those are the kinds of things that you want to consider. So give yourself more time. Vote.org says we recommend 7 days from the deadline because of postal service delays. So yes, you definitely want to give yourself a margin of error. Black people, we got to give ourselves a margin on top of the margin. That's what I would recommend, right? Because we see people, and I've been told plenty of times today, well, I requested this in April and I didn't get it. I requested this in May and I didn't get it, this, that, and the other. Okay, so now we know for November, maybe requesting it in October is enough time. Maybe requesting it in November is not enough time. So I'm seeing for the primary and ATL, we submitted ours early and online, but never received confirmation. Exactly. I mean, there's a backlog in the resources because the way that these things are processed, they're processed by local officials. If you don't have enough local officials, the stuff doesn't get through quickly. Everybody is doing it, doesn't get through quickly. Plus, then you could add on top of the sinister, right? Sinister, like this is intentional voter suppression. So the thing about it is request your absentee ballot as early as you can. Verify your registration, but you also want to track your absentee ballot as well. There are ways in most cases, again, it's not one size fits all, find out for your particular jurisdiction, where you can check the status of your absentee ballot, your application, and when it's getting sent off. Now, what happens when you've done those things, right? You've sent in your application plenty of time, you still don't get it. Well, if you don't get it, and you can vary, and whatever's stated on your, if you have a tracker that says, all right, yeah, my absentee ballot was never sent, then that's when you go vote in person. Now, if they show that you received it, but you didn't receive it, then that might require additional paperwork, meaning you might have to attest to the fact that you didn't receive it. It's a cancellation of your absentee ballot. So there might be additional paperwork, but if you requested your absentee ballot and you didn't get it in time, you might want to still, I would suggest that you still go try to vote, but also understand that there might be additional requirements. If you received your absentee ballot and you change your mind about absentee voting, then you're going to have to relinquish your absentee ballot. Now, that makes no sense, because all you have to do is, if you want the experience of going in person, then go drop off your ballot at an absentee ballot drop-off point. That would make more sense, right? You can still get the voting experience. Fill it out at home. Go drop it off at one of the designated spots. So these are some of the things that we can do. I'm going to go back to reading some of your comments, but again, we have to figure out the strategies, and I don't have all of the answers, but I just want us to start thinking collectively about, okay, how can we protect ourselves? How can we protect our vote, knowing everything that's going to be thrown at us? What can we do? Another thing is poll workers. So if you have the time and the ability to volunteer to work the polls, then try to do that. Because we've seen, there were some reports today out of Georgia where the polls were understaffed. Let me explain something. Poll workers get paid $30 a day. This is not like you have a whole bunch of people. Okay, Layla says, I gave them my unopened absentee ballot today and voted electronically. Now, see, I would rather vote with my absentee ballot, because that's a paper trail versus the electronic voting. But it's certainly up to you. If that's what you prefer to do, you can do that. You can relinquish. If you have your absentee ballot and you change your mind and you want to vote at a poll, then you relinquish your absentee ballot. You have to bring it with you, relinquish it, and then you go on ahead and you vote as normal. But anyway, working the polls. So we need people to work the polls. We need volunteers, because you can have all the equipment, but if you don't have the volunteers, then that slows the lines and things like that. So these are the kinds of things that we want to think about. I'm gonna wrap up this conversation, but what just to recap, the main things I want to encourage you to do is, I understand the emphasis on the governors or on the secretaries of state, but we can be impactful by pressing our local officials, the ones who actually administer these elections as well. Let's be in their faces. Let's make sure they're accountable. Let's make sure that we're voting for those people if you can vote, and it's not just it's not, I lost my train of thought looking at these comments. That we aren't just yelling at yelling into the Twitter sphere. We have to be engaged. So that's what I had today. I'm going to go back to some of your comments. I wonder if you can send your absentee ballot by certified mail with a return receipt. Maybe. I don't know how that works. I mean, a lot of times your absentee ballots, from what I've seen, they're already pre-postaged. So I think if somebody's gonna if somebody was sinister enough to throw out your ballot, I don't know how much that would help. But yeah, I mean, I understand the concern. So there are multiple concerns with absentee ballots. Number one, the concern, you're gonna request it and not get it. Okay, you don't get it, go to the polls. If they show that you've received it, then you have to attest that you're canceling your absentee ballot if you don't have it physically. That's usually an option. All right, then your next concern. I received my absentee ballot and I sent it in. How do I know that it's counted? Well, that's something that you should be able to track. Most places allow you to track it. Or if you don't feel comfortable with mailing it, then you can go on election day or on early voting days or whatever designated period they have, and you can physically hand in your ballot to the designated drop-off. You don't have to just mail it. Just because you have an absentee ballot doesn't mean you have to mail it. It's convenient, but if you would rather hand it off to somebody, you can do that. Other concern about absentee ballot. all right, my absentee ballot is going to get tossed out. Well, it's supposed to give you the opportunity to remedy that. Do they do that all the time? No, unfortunately, they don't. But that is what the intent of it is. So in most places, and I can't say 100% because again, there are 50 different states and everybody does stuff differently. But you should be able to go back and double check that your ballot was cast, accepted, received, all of those things. And you're supposed to be able to be given the opportunity to rectify it. Now, when you fill out your ballot, make sure you take a moment. Most states have a YouTube video, some sort of tutorial, some kind of training materials. Make sure that you fill it out properly. That's another thing that's in our agency to do. Fill it out right yourself. Fill it out right the first time. Then you don't have to worry about all that other kind of stuff. All right. Early vote. That's another thing, if you have that ability to do that. So, all right. Layla says there was a paper trail. It was printed, scanned, and uploaded. Okay, great. I'm glad. Let's see. Anything else that you guys are saying? So, 2 Horses says, remember with mail-in ballots, you need 2 permanent stamps. So, it depends. Some states provide pre-stamped ballots. Some states don't. But if stamps are an issue, you can always go and you can always go drop it off yourself. It doesn't require postage if you go hand it into a designated place. So a lot of people are saying in their state, California, you can check if they received your ballot exactly. Okay, Carol, emphasizing. We must mail or drop off ballot in a provided ballot mailer. Okay, then we can track in Nebraska. So like I would not encourage you to go to do the extra step of certified mail, this, that, and the other. Just send it. If you're that concerned, drop it off in person. Florida doesn't provide free postage for mail-in ballots. So these are the things that you have to know for your particular state. Different states have different rules. But it doesn't cost postage to go drop your ballot off in person. Must have a user pen, must sign provided mailer. So that's another important thing. Make sure you're educated on the rules of your ballot. Make sure you're educated on the rules of registering. Not every state has the same registration rules. Some states you have to have an actual ID. Some states you have to have a driver's license to register online. There are a lot of different rules. So that's why now the onus is on us to get the training, to do the research, and make sure we're arming ourselves with as much information as possible to do this. Chandra says ours have to be notarized in Oklahoma. It was overturned, but legislature had to put it back in place. These are the kinds of crazy things that we have to prepare ourselves for. If you have to go through that, maybe it's too much trouble. I don't know if you're referring to an absentee ballot or if you're referring to an application. But the point is, find what works for you. Also understanding that all of these strategies, even though they have it's still the same impact of one vote, they're not necessarily going to give you the same, they're not all created equal, because standing in line for 4 hours is not created equal to mailing in your ballot. And there are going to be people that are going to point to, every horror story of why you shouldn't do this and why you shouldn't do that. I'm not saying that those horror stories don't occur, but Colorado, for instance, is a state that does all vote by mail. So there are ways of suppressing the vote. If people want to do that, they have the capacity to do that. But there are things that we can do. There are tactics that we can take to arm ourselves. And so that's what I wanted to say. My mom says she's going to volunteer to work the polls in November. Never thought of that before now. Well, I hope that coronavirus ain't a thing in November, because otherwise you need to be at home, Mom. I know, as I'm telling people to go be for poll voters. But yeah. All right, y'all. I'm going to wrap this up. I appreciate all your comments. I think it was a great discussion. But, vote.org. I'm going to say that one more time, vote.org. And remember that everything we're going through now pales in comparison to what our ancestors went through. Poll taxes, getting lynched to try to prevent people from voting. So we can do the extras. We can check our registration multiple times. We can, put 2 stamps on the thing if that's what is required. But we got to do what we got to do. And we know that there's voter suppression. What are we going to do about it? What's in our capacity to do? So that's all that I have to say. It's not to judge anybody. Again, not to wag my finger at anybody. It's just to say, what are we going to do to arm ourselves? So look up your local election administrator and start there with how you can be most impactful for making change. Thanks y'all for all your comments. I'm gonna hop off, so I'm not gonna get a chance to go through everybody, but I appreciate all y'all. I will see you tomorrow at 5 p.m. ish, 5 to 5:05. So thanks y'all. Y'all have a good night. If you're in Georgia, stay up. Hope you vote. If you're in Fulton County, tune in to their meeting that's about this topic. And we got 5 months to get our act together because the Republicans ain't gonna do it for us. So we got 5 months to do what we can to try to be able to vote with no issues or as little issue as possible. So peace out, y'all.